And
Let's, okay. I often have trouble when the recording comes up with the sign not leaving, not being, getting rid of that recording sign.
there should be a little X on it to kill it.
Okay, I just want to make sure that Teresa doesn't have that problem with her screen.
I'm good. Thank you, Shelley.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
I think you have to basically accept it with the by clicking on the got it button. Otherwise, it may not go away.
What happens when I'm screen sharing is that my cursor disappears and I'm not able to do anything with it. So I just wanted to make sure that Teresa was okay with that.
Okay, everybody cross your fingers for technology today. And,
But we've had our better.
yeah. But so let's go ahead and start, Teresa. And we're really grateful that you're here, really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And I'm really hoping this is something that you're okay with the sharing afterward, because I think it's going to be something that is really relevant to a lot of people that are not here today. But take it over, Teresa.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for inviting me. And while I've got the right screen up that you can see, I can't really see you all. So if you have a question, please jump in and say, stop, slow down, let's discuss this. Or if you all want to wait till the end, that'd be fine too. I think much of what I'm going to talk about today, you all already know. So maybe I can add a few things in here about just from what's going on at the city council level that might be new information. But I think a lot of this you all already know, because it's like preaching to the choir. You're already tapped into all of this.
Teresa, before we get started, I can't find the button to mute everyone, but can people mute themselves until you're ready, until you need to speak? And then background noise will not confuse things, please.
Okay, so my name's Teresa Turk. I know many of you. We've worked to save the Buffalo River, or we've interacted on situations with the city, with different wards or different activism that's happened. And I grew up, I'm going to give you a really brief introduction about my life. I grew up in Little Rock and Texarkana, and then I came up here my freshman year to go to the U of A. I graduated with a degree in zoology and a master's in anthropology. And then I decided that I could live my whole life in Fayetteville, a glorious, wonderful town, but also in the state of Arkansas. And I just really wanted to get out and see the rest of the country and the world, and kind of find if there were some green alternatives, to get rid of some of our isms that we have particularly intensely in the South. And so that took me to Alaska and then to Seattle. I lived in Seattle for about 13 years. I worked for National Marine Fisheries Service as a fisheries scientist. While I was in Seattle, I worked primarily at sea, collecting stock assessment information all up and down Alaska and also the West Coast. And then I moved to DC and I became a bureaucrat. I tried to implement policy changes and kept hitting my head against the brick wall or the government wall or the bureaucratic wall, and eventually got tired of that and came back to Fayetteville. But while I was in DC, I also had the opportunity to do some work in West Africa and also in the South Pacific to try and really get some of their data collection and their information going down there, set up programs with them. Largely, those were not sustainable or successful in the end, which is another reason why I came back to Fayetteville. Came back here in 2012. Started my own little mini consulting firm, and then I ran for city council, largely as a result of our successful endeavors with the Buffalo River and meeting all of you people, and was able to be elected. So since I've been on the council, I've been trying to implement more sustainable programs, and I'll talk about some of those today and let you know where those are. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. And so I'll get started with the climate change. Anybody have any questions to begin with? Okay, so I call the talk today a climate of change, steps to creating a more resilient Northwest Arkansas. So here is just a mural that I thought was really great. That was from Glasgow last fall, where on the left-hand side is this beautiful, glorious flower and garden and healthy oceans and healthy trees. And then on the right side is fire.
Hey, Teresa,
Yes.
your slide did not change.
Oh, it didn't? Okay. Well, shoot. All right. Well,
We thought we had it.
how about
we
there?
go. Okay, that works.
Okay. Thank you. Gosh, it's bad having two screens. I think I should simplify my life again with just one. But anyway, this is the slide from Glasgow, where you see this beautiful planet on the left-hand side, and on the right, dirty oceans, fire, death. And it looks kind of like if I put my cursor over here, can you see my cursor right here?
Yes.
Okay, so just the black billowing smoke. So not a pretty thing for the future. So every year they are having these climate conferences, and there's been quite a bit of discussion about what climate mitigation is versus climate resiliency. And a lot of times they're interchangeable. And as Dick pointed out, maybe it would be a good idea to define them. And so I've got a couple of definitions here. So climate mitigation really just means not putting any other carbon dioxide or other methane and other climate changing products into the planet that we need to stop right now in emitting additional CO2 and other climate accelerators. And then climate change and climate adaptation really also means resiliency, which is really changing our behavior and also planning for the future, because we already know that we're going to have climate change that's happening. We're already seeing it. So we need to implement systems where we can be more resilient, when we can withstand some of these effects of climate change. There's also another definition from the UN Climate Change Conference, which again, mitigation is slowing the rate of global warming. That's not adding anything else into the atmosphere. And then resiliency is creating these social systems that climate proof for the future. So how are we more resilient when we have big flooding events or big storms? So we're humans. We can tear things down, but we can also build them up. And we also can adapt. As difficult as our adaptation skills are these days, we can still do it if we put our minds to it. So you all know we have a lot of evidence for climate change. The surface temperature in 2021 was tied with 2018 as the 6th warmest on record. Global temperatures are 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit over the average, which was from 1951 and 1980. That's not very long ago. So a 1.5 degrees of Fahrenheit change is large. Within the fishery sector that I'm very familiar with, we are changing fish migration patterns. The pollock over in Alaska are moving much further north to cooler waters. Lobster are moving further into Canada on the East Coast, further north. And so these are creating economic changes. The lobster fishermen, they're losing revenue because it's in Canadian waters. And then we're also seeing warmer trending tree species like loblolly pine that are gradually shifting more northward than they were before. But there's a ton of examples. These are just a few that I've highlighted that we can see within our lifetimes, and really within 5 or 10 years, we can see many of these changes. I can tell you within fisheries, we are seeing huge changes. And once we see that, we don't have the ability to really predict. We don't know where the fish will be. We don't know whose waters they will be in. Will we be able to feed people, especially over in West Africa, where 70 to 80% of their protein is based on marine resources. So are those fish going to be right off their coast and able for them to be captured and actually consumed by these developing countries. So I'm going to fess up about how old I am. I turned 60 last August, and there was this website that actually allowed you to kind of put in your birth date and to see how much the climate has changed since you were born. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And so you can kind of see globally here, starting about 1975, we really started shifting much more into a warm pattern. We've only really had 1 year where it was below the average. This was the average for the 20th century. And then in North America, we can also see that, sure, we've had some highs and lows, but they've mostly been much warmer, much warmer, especially since about 1980. So only about 12% of the time has the temperature been below the 20th century average. So there was another website that said, well, how much CO2 levels have changed since you were born? Again, this has been over 60 years. So this has gone up about 30%. The CO2 level in our atmosphere, just in my lifetime, has gone up almost 30%. So these are very scary trends, and the changes is pretty dramatic. We can also look at some of the global climate change from NASA, and here on the left side is the glacier, the Alaska's Glacier Bay, which I've been in several times. You can see this was in 1986, and then over here in 2019, look how much the glacier has receded. A huge amount of it receding, and that hasn't been that long, 33 years. That's very short time period on a global scale. Same thing over here in California at Shasta Lake. This was only in 2 years. So see how much the water has receded. They've had a big drought. So we're seeing huge environmental changes just within a very, very short period of time. And then the most dramatic one, and the one that made me kind of wake up and go, oh my God, this is really bad, is the PBS special that I saw the other night that really talked about these Arctic sinkholes that they had recently discovered, and methane seeps. The methane seep they highlighted was in Kotzebue, which is in Alaska. And these sinks, what they think now is this is sort of a chimney-like effect, that this methane is being released from deep within the earth and channeling up through these sort of sinkholes and escaping. And, methane is 9 times as bad as carbon dioxide. So this is pretty bad. One of the takeaway messages from this presentation was that these methane sinkholes and their release, they haven't really been accounted for in our climate models. And so things seem to be accelerating more and more, and we have a lot of surprises that are going on. And I find this extremely troubling. So what's going on closer to home? What have we seen in Washington County? And I've tried to I've tried to place where I found this information so that people can go back and play with some of the models if they want to. So you can see this on the bottom of most of the slides where I got some of this information. So in Washington County, from 1901 to December of 2021, on average, we're getting about 7 inches more per year in precipitation. And what I found really interesting is they also had what was the highest time period of rain and what was the lowest. So this 1926 and 1927, that's when they had that huge flood on the Mississippi. That was the highest recorded. Again, it's from 1901. So we probably didn't have very good records back in the 1800s or before. And then we had a very serious drought sort of in 1962 and 1963. But on average, we're getting about 7 more inches per year of precipitation. And then what's the yearly temperature trend in Washington County? Well, it's on average, on a 12-month average, it's almost 1 degree of Fahrenheit more than the previous 120 years. So while this is pretty messy data, the trend is largely upward. It's increasing in temperature. And this is the ranges from each year. This is a pretty dramatic change right here in 2010, 2012, but on average, it's about a degree per year. Any questions so far? Okay. I'll keep going.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
I do have a question, Teresa. You were saying that 6.9 inches additional each year in rain?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, 6.9 inches. Again, on average, this is averaged out. So
Teresa, and on this same question, this increased rainfall for the county, have you noticed any patterns between the seasons? Is a season where this additional rainfall is coming in, or is it just throughout the year?
you know, I haven't looked into it enough, but we have had, we had that huge flood in 2017, if you all recall, and we've had also, I think it was in 2012, we had a very big flood event too. The models are saying that we will have much more extreme events. And I think the 2011 and 2017 floods actually show this. I mean, I don't have them visually really well represented here on this slide, but certainly those two events, we had wide scale flooding throughout the city.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. So ones that really stood out for me, because when I came back here and got all focused on the Buffalo River, I got all focused on algae. And then lo and behold, Lake Fayetteville really started having algal blooms that were documented or are visual enough to be documented and give people concern starting in 2018. So 2018, 2019, and 2020, Lake Fayetteville had concerning algal blooms. And then even over here at Iams Park, the dog park also had an algal bloom in 2019. So we're starting to see, the effects, probably a combination of a lot of phosphorus that's washing in from stream bank erosion, for long-term bad agricultural practices that are upstream from Lake Fayetteville, but also probably in conjunction with temperature, with increasing temperature. So those are local effects that we've seen. Here's another picture. This one, I have to confess, the algae was from the Buffalo. I couldn't find one from Lake Fayetteville. So I will put a little note there that that's a picture from the Buffalo, but I think it probably represents what was happening at Lake Fayetteville. So we say that we're a green city and we're doing all kinds of things. We're the greenest in Arkansas. And I would agree that we probably are the greenest city in Arkansas, but just because we're number one in Arkansas doesn't mean that we couldn't do a lot more and that we shouldn't be doing a lot more. But the city did take significant steps to create the Energy Action Plan, and that was adopted in 2018. And some of those goals were 100% local clean energy by 2030, energy assessments of city property, and that's going on right now. I can tell you they're doing a big assessment of city property. Achieve 50% of community-wide clean energy by 2030. I don't think we're anywhere close to that. And 100% by 2050. Achieve 40% tree canopy coverage by 2030. We're about at 38 or 39%, depending on which model you choose to use. So we've still got a ways to go, especially with trees. reduce per capita vehicle miles to 2010 levels by 2030. I think we need to really work on that. I don't think we've done very much to help to get close to that level. And we still have a long way to go with biking and walking by 2030, and then achieve 40% total waste diversion from the landfill by 2027. We're at about 19 or 20%. So again, it's good to aspire and to set goals, but we still have a very long way to go. One thing we have done that I'm extremely proud of the city doing is that we've created 2 5-megawatt solar arrays. Each one of those is at the Nolan plant and the West Side wastewater treatment plants. They consume a huge amount of electricity, and I never knew this until I got on the city council and got on this water and sewer board, but they consume a massive amount. So with these 10 megawatts of solar that we have now, that has made the city 72% of getting its energy, 72% of it's coming from clean energy. So it's been a huge boost. I think before this 10 megawatt solar array was implemented, we were getting about 17 or 18% in clean energy. And that was coming from wind and solar farms that we had, the electricity that we purchased, I think, from Ozarks Electric. So this bumped us up quite a bit. And I think the most dramatic part about it is how much we have saved in terms of money. So we've saved almost $400,000. This was from the October 2021 energy report. So almost $400,000. And we've saved a huge amount of CO2. These are metric tons of CO2. So that's about 29,000 metric tons of CO2 emissions. So I have to give Peter Nierengarten and his group a huge amount of credit, and the other partners that worked with the city to make this happen. I just wish they would extend it a lot more, add 5 more megawatts and save even more, get us to 100% quicker than 2030, get us to it, next year or the year after. So we've also done some other things. Again, we're trying to achieve a 40% tree canopy by 2030. So we have the very popular and successful 1,200 trees that are given away in the fall. We run out usually within an hour and a half. So that's been wonderful. This year in the city budget, the mayor wanted to add $100,000 to plant more trees in Fayetteville. So we have another $100,000 in the budget to plant more trees throughout the city. And then we do have tree canopy requirements and restrictions in different zoning districts. Those range from about 15%, or actually 10%, I think, in commercial, to 30%. So there is a range there where there's a requirement. But in my opinion, it's not really enough. But these tree canopy requirements, I believe that Fayetteville may be the only city that has that. There may be Hot Springs, but most other cities do not have this requirement. And the Arkansas State Legislature often threatens to do something about our tree canopy requirements. So we're always kind of right there on the edge. So if you do the Bradford pear and Chinese privet bounty, if you cut them down, you document them, the city will give you a free tree. So this is another successful program, and I think other cities have modeled this program after City of Fayetteville's. But I would argue that the city is missing some other things. They've done a great job with the Energy Action Plan, but there's more that we can do. And the things that we're missing are establishing these water quality baselines and tracking and setting goals. So how many streams and stream sections are impaired? I know we have significant numbers, but nobody has said how many those are, and nobody is tracking them. How many algal blooms? We just kind of talked about that between 2018 and 2020, that we know of 3 at Lake Fayetteville for sure. How long did they last? And how far did they extend? Were they really small and concentrated, or were they all over the lake? So we need to set baselines and start tracking that. There are other things, stream bank erosion. This morning in the newspaper, if you read the newspaper about the Dem Gazette about the Illinois River, they've actually gone in there and identified how much stream bank erosion is happening every year and prioritize where are those places. It's basically they're losing 20 acres of land every year. So we need to do the same thing. We need to go in and prioritize areas that we need to repair. And we have done some really good work down there by the airport, down by Greenland and some other areas. Sandy Formica's watershed water resource conservation group has done a lot of remediation in those areas, but we can do more. There's also that dam down there by Pump Station. That dam has been there over 100 years, and we're working to get that removed. We've got several partners that are working with the city, and I hope that that's going to be removed in the next 2 years. We also need to document how many square feet of impervious surface we have in the city. I keep asking that question every time a rezoning comes up. Well, how much of it is impervious? And I have not successfully yet been able to get the codes changed where they're required to show that, where we can start tracking it. So incentivizing low impact development, trying to get people to use impervious pavers. Those are things that we need to work on, and incentivizing mature tree retention so that we do increase tree canopy and we really increase the carbon sequestration. And then finally, calculate and track carbon sequestration and emissions from within our city limits. That has not been done either. So are we increasing on our emissions? Are we decreasing? If we have more tree canopy, we can sequester more carbon. If we have more mature trees, we can really sequester more carbon. So one thing that we have been successful at is working on Lake Fayetteville. And I got to give a shout out to Margaret Britton, who I think is on the call right now, and other people that were very concerned about a big development that was going upstream of Lake Fayetteville in the watershed. And so we drafted a water quality improvement study that was designed to work with our local, regional, and national environmental partners. That area over there upstream of Lake Fayetteville is very complicated. You have Springdale involved, you have the city of Fayetteville, and you have Washington County. So we all need to kind of work together. This grant, this study was approved by the council on March 2nd, 8-0, and it was funded at 200,000 level. That was the level that we needed, that we felt that we needed to have this study implemented. The city's gone through the process to select Olson as the contractor, but they've not funded it yet. It was not in the 2022 budget, despite my advocacy for that. The city, I believe, is going to support having American Recovery Act funds to be used to fund this study. So we'll see. That process is going to get underway in the next couple of months or so. But if we're able to get the improvement study funded and actually get it started, it will develop a watershed strategy improvement plan with all those stakeholders I just mentioned. And we want to get this done within a decade. We can't just have some, kind of plan that sits on the shelf and if it's never implemented, there's no funding for it to actually get it improved. So I'm more of an action person. I saw a lot of reports, a lot of studies sit on the shelf in DC, and I sure don't want that to happen in Fayetteville. So we want to get that plan implemented. The key is implementation within a decade. And then finally, if the city departments are doing anything, like they're expanding the trail right here from 12 feet to 16 feet, then they need to be very cognizant of any of the impacts that they can have on Lake Fayetteville during that expansion or any other kind of work that they're doing within the watershed. So I mentioned we lack incentives or regulations to retain old trees. There was this great article in Science Magazine and the Smithsonian Magazine just last month that really highlighted the old man and the tree, where they thought that old growth forests were long gone. Well, in fact, there are lots of small little remnant forests around the country. I'm taking a class right now from David Staley. That's ancient forest and sustainability, which is an incredibly great class. And there are remnant forests. But what jumped out at me was, just like with so many other things, the older the age of the tree, the more carbon is sequestered. So when we think that we cut down a tree and we plant 30 little saplings and we're going to make up for that carbon sequestration, that's not true. That's not true. We've lost so much of the good properties from these older trees. By the way, the same thing is true with fish. If you catch an old female, her reproductive potential is about 500 times as great as a age 5 fish. So the older it is, they're more reproductive potential, and with trees, the more carbon sequestration. And I'll give you a really recent action. This is where the city council comes in, where, I have to pay attention to these things and usually get defeated, but always am trying. So if you look right here, this is Razorback Road, okay? This is the baseball field right down here at the bottom left. And then up here at the top right, these are where the new tennis courts are being built. Martin Luther King is up higher up at the very top of the page. And this area right here in the red is where there's a full tree canopy right here. These are older trees. I haven't walked through it because I didn't want to trespass on this property, but this is fully treed area. And then this is the old distribution plant. I think it's a beer distribution plant right here. So this came up for rezoning about last month. And they were changing the zoning from C1, which is commercial 1, to what they call an RPZD, a residential properties zoning district. Okay. So their argument was that, hey, we need to develop this. It's close to the university. Look, there's already housing over here. And so we need to develop this into more student housing or more affordable housing. They would call it workforce affordable housing. And because we're rezoning it from C1 to this RPZD, it's going from 15% tree canopy that was required under the C1 to 30% tree canopy. So, hey, we're being good guys because we're going to retain 30% of the tree canopy. Well, in this red box right here, this is about 11 acres. Okay. And these are mature trees. And so all these trees, or not all of them, but most of them are going to get cut down, and we'll only retain 3.3 acres of trees. So we're going to lose over 7 acres of mature trees. And this is an example of how we are rapidly losing our tree canopy within Fayetteville. And we need to really start requiring these calculations of how much impervious surface are you going to put in there? And then what's the loss from those 7.7 acres of mature trees in carbon sequestration? So I would love to see us require impervious pavers being used, pervious pavers being used. And this is a small little demonstration project out at Kessler Mountain that is so easy to miss. But this is what pervious pavers look like. And sure, they're more expensive, but on the balance of things, how can we figure out how to incentivize? I would rather incentivize than regulate some of these things. So how can we incentivize developers to use pervious pavers rather than just using concrete and cement and just paving everything over? So I would love to hear some ideas from you all about things like this. So now I'm going to switch gears here a little bit and kind of get back to preserving land and figuring out how we can preserve land and be more resilient as a city. So around 2010, FNHA, and maybe many of you are members of this group. I don't know, I'm not a member, but they went through a huge process working with lots of stakeholders and completed in 2010 this green infrastructure planning. And some of the things that they accomplished is they created this top 100 parcels of land in the area that had high ecological value to be purchased. They also went through and identified high ecologically valued properties, not just with these parcels, but throughout Washington County and throughout the city of Fayetteville. And the city of Fayetteville adopted these properties that they identified as the Enduring Green Network. That's what they called it. Okay, so they had a name, they had some areas, they put that name to that area and called it the Enduring Green Network. But there were absolutely no regulations behind it. And then to expand this, the Northwest Arkansas Council also adopted most of what FNHA did under the green infrastructure planning. They changed a few things, but it was largely adopted as their open space plan. So I'm going to give you an example right here of the city's Enduring Green Network. So can you see these little trees right here, these little green trees right over here and here? This is along I-49. Mount Comfort is just up here to the north, Over here is a small neighborhood. To the south is Weddington. And then this is Hamstring Creek. This is the main Hamstring Creek going over to West Fayetteville. And then here's a tributary of Hamstring Creek. And then here is here's a neighborhood, a subdivision. So I hope I've been able to orient you all. So I'll just do a little bit more. If you turn off I-49 right here, you're going to turn off on the Mount Comfort exit, and you'll take your first left after the exit, and you'll come down here on Shiloh Road right here. Okay, there's a lot of GTS is right. Oh, excuse me, GTS is right here.
My microphone is stopped.
Excuse me.
Excuse me, I thought I was muted.
Okay. Hopefully y'all can follow where this is. But anyway, this is the so-called Enduring Green Network. And this is another rezoning that's coming before us in 2 weeks, where they actually want to rezone this an RZN, it's 9.11 acres, rezone this from industrial to community services. And so my point in showing you all this is there is no protection whatsoever. So here's a floodplain that they'll have to kind of work around. Here's the Enduring Green Network that they'll be able to cut those trees down. And it's just a name. There's nothing behind it. There's no restriction, no regulation behind it, only what zoning, what they're asking to rezone, which is community services. And I think I should have looked this up, but I think it's 25%, either 20 or 25% of tree canopy they have to retain. So we have a ways to go. I'm sorry, this is kind of long-winded. Any questions right now? Okay.
I have lots of questions, but I think it'd be, and especially about this one, but you may be covering some of it, because my questions are about what are you proposing to do? So if you're going to talk about that later, we could talk about that when you're ready.
Okay.
To talk about it. Sounds
good, Gladys. So as a response to some of this, and with a lot of back and forth with the city to try and get more support, and also reaching out to other groups, we came up with this climate resiliency plan. Now, the plan, there had 3 major components. I'm going to kind of go over 2, and then I'll hit the 3rd one on the next slide. And it was approved by the council 6-0 on November 16th. So the master plan, the climate resiliency master plan, is the desire is to update the FNHA green assessment. We've had lots of changes in the last 12 years. So how are any of those high valuable properties still left? Have they all been developed? Have some of them been developed? Are they all still there? So update the FNH green assessment. And we were able to get $100,000 approved in the 2022 city budget. This would either complement the existing energy action plan or stand independent. And it would hopefully create those benchmarks that I talked about before. How many dams do we have? How many miles of streams are impaired? How many miles of streams have streamside erosion or are vulnerable to stream bank erosion? So it would establish some of those key baselines that I mentioned. The other thing is with erosion, we have lots of that legacy phosphorus that's going into our streams, creating those algal blooms. So all of that would be benchmarked, would be baseline, would be updated and monitored every year. Because if we don't start measuring it, we don't know where things are headed. We can't see where the difference is, and we can't make progress if we don't know where the problem is. It would also assess climate resiliency through the lens of environmental justice. And Gladys, I appreciate you and DeAndre adding this to the resolution, to the plan, because that was a major oversight. I had just forgotten to include that. So we've got it in there. And so what does that look like? That looks like if are more low income households, are they more vulnerable to climate change? Do they live in a floodplain? Do they live in an area that's prone to fires? All sorts of things. Are there disparities in tree canopy coverage from a high income neighborhood to a low income neighborhood? So we're going to also look at that in this master plan. And then the third part was trying to get the city to commit to adding $100,000 in what they call a capital improvement fund to purchase highly valued ecological land and to fund conservation easements. That failed to be funded. It was not in the 2022 budget. And when I brought it forward as an amendment to the budget, it failed 2-4. Only Sarah Bunch supported me with funding this. And the idea is that if you, and this, I'm using some city terminology, capital improvement fund. Well, how is that different from other funds? Well, the capital improvement fund, it just bills. It doesn't go away at the end of the budget cycle every year. It stays. And so we could add $100,000 every year to it or more. This was just a minimum amount. We could add that to this fund so that when lands come up for purchase, or areas such as around our stream banks where we need to improve our riparian zones, that we have some money in the bank, that we have a reserve that we can go in that's dedicated to this, to buy those kind of high ecologically valuable or sensitive lands. And it also provides a place where citizens can donate and put money more toward purchase or make land donations, purchase toward these lands. But again, it failed 2-4. So I'm going to bring it back up again. I'm just going to have all my ducks in a row this time and maybe make a more passionate and informed argument and maybe win a few more of my council members over. So stay tuned because I'll be reaching out to you when I think the time is right. So I just mentioned how these green funds can be used. Well, they can be, we can buy some floodplain areas. A lot of the areas along the bike trails are owned by the state or by the U of A. And so if we want to go in and plant riparian areas or restore them, we have to ask the U of A or the state. Or maybe the U of A, the state, they don't want us in there. They don't want us to do it. So we need to, I think the city needs to have conservation easements or purchase some of this property. We could also add to our nature preserves or our parks. I know Lisa Orton has made this argument about adding more land to Markham Hill, the 64 acres I think that the city swapped recently. We can add more to that park. There are other areas where we could add more land to really increase that area, that nature zone. High ecologically valuable areas such as steep hillsides with mature trees. The argument has been, well, you're just going to buy land so people can't build houses. And I would argue back, we would like to buy land that have high ecological value, that were there areas where people are probably not going to build houses, or if they do, they shouldn't be building houses on slopes that are greater than 15%. So this would be an opportunity to have conservation easements or buy those lands. And then, of course, rare landscapes, prairie remnants. We're seeing prairie remnants being bulldozed all the time. So we need to have the ability to counteract and actually purchase some of that land. And so I'm almost at the conclusion of the talk. I'm sure that you guys are doing this already. What can we do to locally combat climate change? Well, we can plant those trees. If there's areas that you need to pave, use pervious pavers. Use less of everything. And I'm sure this group is recycling and compost more than almost anybody else in the city. Donate and preserve land, bike and walk instead of taking the car. Get your solar panels. I know the Omni Center has solar panels, so you guys are already doing a lot. I need to buy some solar panels and put them on my house. And then use rechargeable batteries instead of gas, like your lawnmower. I bought a great battery lawnmower last year, and I love that thing. And I'm sure there's a whole lot more that could be listed here. The other thing is lobby your city council members, lobby the mayor, lobby everybody for greener infrastructure, greener policies. And also your state legislatures. They overturned the ban that we had for the styrofoam ban. They overturned that last spring. So we need to make sure that we want them to allow us to have local control. I mean, that's what they ran on when they were not in the state legislature. They said local control here. Well, let us have local control. And right here on the right, this picture is of my two favorite guys, the Lilly brothers, who dressed up and went down to Little Rock and I think this was in Jasper, and lobbied to save the buffalo. They were there every time. They just kept showing up, and they were so persuasive and stuck out so much that I think they made a huge impression with many of the political people in power. And then vote, as I'm sure you all are all signed up to vote. We're having this whole discussion about voting rights, but we have to vote and continue to get people out to the polls and let the politicians know exactly what we want. And then finally, this is my favorite quote. So if you always hit your target, your aim is too close. So I will keep bringing stuff back to the city council, even if they turn me down. I'll just keep going back again and again and again until we get some of these green ideas, green ordinances, and funding in place. So that's the end of my talk. Thanks for listening to my long-winded presentation that probably did not tell you guys much about what's going on, because you're probably doing all the good work right now.
That was amazing, Teresa. I think that you covered a lot of territory that I think a lot of us needed to know that. But Margaret has had her hand up for a couple minutes. Margaret, can you just unmute and give us your quote, your statement or question or whatever?
Sure, thanks. Teresa, a couple of questions. If you could go back a few slides to that area that's up for rezoning, first of all, that's my first question, that one. So rezoning from industrial 1. So Does industrial one have to save a certain percent of trees? How does that compare to community services? What's likely to happen there?
So I should have looked that up, Margaret. It's an oversight on my part, but I bet I would guess that industrial one has about maybe 10%, maybe 15% of required tree canopy.
Okay.
And community services, I believe, has about 20 or 25%. So by rezoning, they would have to save more trees. That is true.
Okay. But you're opposed to it because it's in this enduring green network. What do you think should happen with that? What's the best case scenario there?
So kind of my point is that I get shot down a lot because the city will say, oh, we have the enduring green network. So my point is that look at how many trees are in here. And I should have added a true shot of what's in there, from the satellite. But we're going to lose these trees right in here. There's nothing to stop us from losing those trees. And sure, we will get them a little bit more tree canopy here, but to say that we have an enduring green network, I think is just greenwashing by the city, because there's no regulation there. It's just a coverage on a map.
So there's absolutely no quantification about what the word enduring means. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. I'm saying that they've got these big spreads in their GIS maps of saying these are enduring green networks, but there's no regulation. The only regulation that's on there is what it's zoned. So this piece right here, it's zone industrial 1. That's the only regulation. Now, there is some stream side protection with, this stream right here. There are protections along the stream, but there's no protection for these trees whatsoever, except that tree canopy coverage under industrial 1.
Would it be possible for the city to enact a rule that says within the enduring green network, we need to keep, say, 50% of the trees or something like that? Is that even possible to do legally?
Well, it's possible, but their argument is that, well, look what we've done already, but we're barely hanging on with our tree ordinance because the state legislatures really want to take away our tree ordinance. So it's risky, okay? And this is why I'm advocating purchase or conservation easement rather than a regulation about the enduring green network.
I see. One other quick question. Would you go back a number of slides to that interesting graph? It was hard for me to see the detail on it. It's a graph indicating how we've changed with those solar panels.
Oh, yeah, this one. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got CO2 on the left axis. Is that the orange or the blue? I'm sorry, I'm just confused about.
That's the orange. And by the way, just so you know, every 2 weeks when we have agenda setting session, like we're going to have one this Tuesday night, Peter Nierengarten gives us an energy report. So it's once a month. And so this is part of his report. So we're seeing how they're doing on a month-to-month basis in terms of tracking some of their fuel usage and also how the solar panels are doing.
So what are the blue lines?
The blue lines are the amount of money that we're saving every month. So, for example, we save a lot more money during the winter time because we've banked a lot of the solar production from the summer.
Okay.
And then this is just, I think this is probably from 2019 up until now. So, but this is the cumulative savings.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Do other people have questions they'd like to bring up?
I do.
All right, go ahead.
Just some things that I thought of, and by the way, Teresa, very good and informative presentation. I learned a few things. This is all new for me, although I do a lot of the things that I try to do on my own. One of the things that I've often wondered about, because I've lived in bigger cities as well, this is the first time I've come back to this area of the country where I was raised. But have we ever thought about, because housing is the big deal, everybody, there's not enough housing. We want all these workers to come here, and trust the country. People are finding out they're just tired of losing their homes. They're tired of the fires, the floods.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to end up like every single state, every single big city, because everybody moves in, they build up everything, and then you end up with a place like Houston where it just floods all the time and all these problems. So, this is a great time to act now. And I totally agree with that. But one of the things I thought about was, if you're not going to move everybody into Northwest Arkansas, you need to spread people out throughout the state. And if you want to cut down on emissions, have we ever thought, or is there any talk about high-speed rail or any type of transportation option that would actually be effective here, that we could do before all these homes and all these, areas are already completely filled with infrastructure? Then you have to tear it down, and nobody wants to do that. It costs twice as much. People can live further out. That's going to make it more affordable for them to live, to buy a house, to buy a home. And is there any plans to do that? Are we talking about that at all?
Well,
Because traffic is a nightmare. Who wants to
Well,
live in LA other than
that's
the
right.
weather?
That's right. Who wants to live in LA? There's been a lot of discussion about a high-speed rail or train from Fayetteville to Bentonville. I have not, I'm sorry, I haven't really monitored those talks. But yes, there has been a lot of discussion about that. I don't think it's moved forward very much. I lived in Seattle where they had no metro system until really recently. And I lived in DC where they had a metro system that they put in the 1960s. And let me tell you, things were so much better in DC. And when the metro went down, everybody stayed at home. It was a huge, massive problem because they couldn't absorb all the cars. Seattle, they used to have this idea, if you don't build it, they won't come. Well, everybody still came to Seattle, much like Northwest Arkansas, because they had Boeing, they had really good jobs, despite the weather out there, but they had to go in and retrofit the metro years later, and it was super expensive. Seattle had, I don't know what the latest is, but they had the second worst traffic in the country because they had no metro system.
Yes. So I'm hoping that we would consider that or look at that while the time is now to start, because it takes, how long it takes to do this. The other thing is, we need money to be able to do these things. So, I'm 63. I speak my mind now. I'm a disabled veteran. I've got nothing left other than my opinion. But just thoughts about that, or just, there's got to be a better solution that somehow that we can work on, not just cutting taxes, but letting people know these are the things we're doing with tax money like this, and being involved with this, because it's so beautiful to go through the state. It is the natural state. I'd hate to see us lose that. I love the wildlife. I love the trails. I love getting out, keeping our water supply clean, working on recycling. That's another question I had. I've always been a little on the fence with how we recycle, and I don't, it's not like I get transported everywhere. I'm in a motorized wheelchair, guys, just to let you know. I can't just go places. Otherwise, I'd go investigate these things myself, like I did in my real life. But, recycling, I don't know how well we recycle. And the thing with the styrofoam, I didn't know we turned that around. But I thought when we did it, I thought, people can change that. And if we start somewhere and it works, then it's better. Because again, we're using land to bury things that are toxic, that are going to get in our water stream. So anyway, that was a question about what are we doing about improving recycling too?
So I could have gone on another hour, but I was like, well, I got to stop sometime. So I didn't talk about transportation. I didn't talk about, my favorite thing to talk about was styrofoam, but I left that off. So here's the situation. So Fayetteville did ban styrofoam, which was awesome. And we saw a lot of places really implement compostable. Yeah. Sometimes they did plastic, but we still have a lot of those folks still implementing the compostable, and my hat is off to them and thank them for doing that. But this is an example where the state legislature got all freaked out and took it back. They said they enacted the auxiliary container law, and basically said, no, you can't ban straws, you can't ban any kind of container, you can't regulate any of that. And so created our styrofoam regulation null and void. Now, styrofoam is probably present in 20 to 25% of our landfill. So what's going on now? Now the landfill wants to expand. And what I've said to the guy, the head guy, George, I said, well, if you just take all that styrofoam out of there, quit putting styrofoam in, you'd have a whole lot more landfill space, you know, to absorb this trash. And he kind of reluctantly laughed about it and agreed with me. But that's kind of where we are here, is that we need to be a little bit more informed and change our behavior, our practices, so that we can live a little bit more gently on the planet. You know, incidentally, I would say that I think our recycling program here is really good, because we separate right at the street, and that's a lot more work for people, but we get a much better return on our investment. So glass, all the glass recycling that we do, that goes to a place in Kansas City, and they actually use it to make fiberglass, and we get a very high rate of our return, as opposed to putting it all together in one canister where we have lots of cross-contamination. So since we separate out, we really actually do, we get a really good return on our investment, on our process.
And Terry's been waiting for a little while. Maybe we could let Terry ask his question.
Hi, can you hear me clearly, please?
Yes, hi.
Terry Tremwell was waiting. Can you wait just a minute, and you'll go next?
I've put in the chat my points. As far as a local city, the things we can do to impact climate most is to move towards a more walkable city through increased density and natural gas lines, and buy e-buses or use electric, some kind of mass transportation that's powered by electricity.
Well, you know, we have this whole thing about infill and increasing density, but I think those are important, but I would counter that, you know, neighborhoods, historic neighborhoods also need to be retained and respected. And yes, I completely agree with the natural gas lines. I mean, the amount of methane that is generated from extraction and that whole process, and also with I'm spacing out the word right now, but yes, there are real problems with natural gas.
Is it possible for the city to ban new natural gas lines? Because that's a 60 to 70 year in infrastructure investment.
I don't know the answer to that. My guess is no. Utilities usually have pretty much full reign on things, and so I doubt it, but I can certainly check on that.
Yeah, one thing that some cities in the country have done is they've banned it on new developments.
Right. I will ask.
And
And-
Terrain might be able to tell us something about Barcelona as a very walkable city. I mean, I'm sure Portugal has some ideas along those lines too.
Indeed, thank you. Of course, Portugal and by extension, Spain, where you have Barcelona, they have, Europe in particular has gone probably much further than unfortunately we have done in the US when it comes to adaptation to climate change and making regulations that affect climate change. So for example, in a place like Portugal, most of the electricity generated is from wind energy, wind turbines, not from natural gas plants. And the effect of that really is because Europe-wide, they have put in place a lot of regulations that have seen various states, I would say nations, make a steady march towards renewable energy and dealing with climate change issues. So yes, you're right, but a lot of it has come through regulation from the EU and the respective governments following on based on such regulations. And if I may then make additional comments, please, to
Yes.
Therese.
Go ahead.
Teresa, I'm thankful for your insightful speech. And thank you, I must say, for the incredible work you're doing. Sometimes I know it may be lonely in that part. I would like to just say a few things that we do or we are doing in New York that may be of help or, probably give some ideas on what to do or what you may want to look at. A lot has been said and there are several points, but I'll just pick on a few. Firstly, one of the things New York did, a collaboration of environmental justice groups, over 200 statewide, came together, lobbied the politicians of the legislature. They did it for over a period of time to get the state to pass what we now call the New York Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. That act essentially deals with climate change. How does the state respond to the issue of climate change? Obviously, taking into account the interests of the environmental groups. So I feel perhaps if something like that could also be thought about in Arkansas, it would help in terms of some of the gaps we see, like when Teresa speaks about, oh, we have certain rules, but there's no meat to it really. Some of these kind of collaborative legislative push by the environmental groups can fleshing out some of the difficulties that we see in terms of making sure we don't just have laws that are empty, but laws that, would give expression to what people really want, which is a healthy environment. And what New York did recently, pursuant to that act, they passed what we call the Green Amendment. But really, what is the Green Amendment? It's an amendment of New York's constitution, a simple one, sponsored, of course, by the climate environmental groups, which gives a right, like we have our human rights and the rest. But this act, the Green Amendment, it amends the Constitution of New York to give a right to every citizen, a right to clean air, a right to clean water, and a healthful environment. What that does is that it now, for purposes of environmental campaign, to deal with some of the issues that Teresa has identified, it gives a right to each individual in cases where certain steps are going to be taken or not taken, which would impact the environment or impact health and water and air. An individual could exercise that right by going to court and say, look, this development or this neglect would result in, adverse environmental health issues for me, because it's a personal right. So that gives a little more, I would say, option in terms of getting our governments or the town council to move in a way that might be helpful. That's just one part. Then Therese did mention the issue of paving and getting the contractors or the builders probably to do something that will be more environmentally friendly. On that one, one of the things I could think of is in New York, they normally give tax credits to some of these developments. So for example, if you're using certain materials that are more environmentally friendly, you get some tax credits, which some of these developers have found most, I would say, incentivizing to get them to do what, will be helpful. Then I will just touch briefly on two things that we have done. Well, in seeking to deal with the effects of climate change, New York has taken a number of initiatives. The local city council of the city of New York, not the state, passed a local law. And what does that law do? The law simply requires the city to draw up a plan showing, for example, areas of the state that are prone to flooding because, of course, of increased, sea levels and because of heavy rains. So that's what it has done, to identify areas that are prone to the effects of climate change. And then that plan is reviewed every 4 years. So we can always, at every point in time, see on a pictorial scale what the state of play is as it relates to climate change affecting us as a society. And then in dealing with two issues, one, New York suffers a lot of flooding, either heavy rains or flooding, whenever there's extreme weather conditions. What it has done, it has passed a number of initiatives, and there's a section in the city mayor's office, which is called the Resiliency Office. What they do, they develop policy initiatives to deal with climate change. But that is coming from the act that they passed, which is the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which of course lays the groundwork, puts the general rule. We want this, is the environmentalist. And then to implement that, it's implemented through initiatives. So one of the initiatives, I'll speak about two initiatives briefly, please. One of the initiatives is the Cool Neighborhood New York City initiative. Climate change, of course, results in higher temperatures, and this naturally would affect people. But what they have done with this is to put that initiative and then identify things that can be done. For example, what they call the green roof. That means you use better materials for roofing in developments or for adapting, so that we don't have a situation where we use the old materials that more or less project a lot of heat. And then in colder weather, that material that we use, we call it green roofing. It conserves heat. So that deals with that aspect of overheating. And then with the flooding aspect, we have another initiative, where we call it the New York Resiliency Initiative Plan. What it does on the roofing side, on the flooding side, is that it says, look, to prevent flooding, we have to review our sewage system, that's the drainage system. We have to review it, and then we have to also identify those communities that are affected, more prone to flooding. And what do? We try to apply for funding, either from the federal government, not as individuals, but as a city. We try to apply for funding, or we apply for funding from the federal government and whatever funds we have. And then we review or get a retrofit for some of the sewage and drainage systems that have been there for a long time and try and make them more resilient where flooding, of course, is prone. So these are some of the things, and I'm aware that on one of these initiatives, funding has come from the federal government, but this kind of funding is not something that we can achieve alone. It has to be the city, going for it, backed up, of course, by a coalition of environmental justice groups. I would add that with the present administration of President Biden and the executive order, the second one he signed when he came into office is called Executive Order 1408. With that, he has been clear in his policy that climate change is a crisis of severe proportion and must be met immediately to deal with the risk that we all face from it. So with that, and also with the recent, with the recent Infrastructure Act, there is a new impetus that might be helpful in terms of generating funds to meet some of these challenges arising from climate change, which naturally would affect our cities. So these are really my contribution, or should I say suggestions. One final point, please. In New York, I'm not sure of what obtains in Arkansas, but in New York, we have this initiative of the state called the Brownfield Cleanup Program. Of course, what that does, the state government, through the Department of Environmental Conservation, gives tax credits to those developers who purchase contaminated land and then remediate it and redevelop it to make it beneficial to the local community. So for example, let's say in a place like Arkansas, we have orphaned mines emitting methane. We may be able to get funding from the federal government that would assist in helping us give tax credits to developers who want to buy some of these lands that are contaminated with methane or abandoned orphan mines and remediate them. That may be helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for all those great suggestions and comments and information. I know that there's going to be a lot of money available, even in the American Recovery Act. There's a huge water quality component in there, and that's why the city wants to maybe fund the Lake Fayetteville Watershed Protection ordinance or resolution from the American Recovery Act funds, but also the infrastructure. So we're definitely, I have to say, the city definitely looks for grants and tries to follow through on those sorts of things. So thanks.
I see Maya. I need to unmute yourself, Maya.
Okay. I have a two-part question. The first one I think is simple, and that is, early in your presentation, you mentioned something which I don't remember. I'm not sure I understood it. Is there a body of some kind, a commission or something, that has been appointed by the city to look at resiliency towards climate change, specifically for that? Did I hear you say there is such a group?
There's a sustainability group, the 3 people within the city. There's a department. They've been really focused just on the energy action plan that I mentioned that was passed. And they've missed this other component. Partly is because of the direction the city council gave them, I guess, back in 2017. And then partly, I would argue, because of their background, their training. But there is a 3-person group, city employees.
Okay. Okay. The other part of my question is, apparently it's not part of their charge, but perhaps it is unstated. is anybody in the city looking at the overall effects of climate change? I understand your emphasis is on land use and water use, et cetera, and I'm not dismissing that. That's important. But I'm also thinking about things like, how are we going to feed ourselves when we no longer can get food from California? You know, there's things like that, and what's going to happen to us when our average temperature increases by 5 degrees year round? What difference is that going to make to us? And what do we need? That kind of thing. Is there anybody looking at those issues?
I don't believe directly, but we have a lot of support within the city to, you know, small farm initiatives. We do apple seeds, you know, so there's several different groups that the city supports, tricycle farms, but I do not believe, you know, the way the city works, and I did not know this until I got on the city council, is that they really take all their direction from these master plans. So if it's in the master plan and it's identified as a priority, then the staff will work toward that. And so that's why the climate resiliency plan had that master plan to update the energy action plan or to add to it. So that's a lot of bureaucratic ease, but the bottom line is, no, I don't believe most of those are contained within what they're investigating right now.
Okay, I have another third part of my question, and then I'll stop. The Planning Commission determines a lot of what comes up to the City Council for the kinds of things you're talking about. Is the Planning Commission in general at all sympathetic to what you're trying to do? Are you butting your heads against them?
Well,
is there
it's changing.
Any response there?
There is some response there, but they really need to hear from you all, and they're more constrained in how they can evaluate a development or not. They have, I think it's 6 different parameters that they can look at, maybe 7. And so the city council is unconstrained. I mean, I shouldn't say that. We're largely unconstrained with how we can make a decision, but the planning commission is yeah. I do think it's changing. Part of it is because who's on the city council. The way it works is that the planning person applies to be on the planning commission, and then they go through the nominating committee, which is a subset of the city council members, and then they are essentially appointed.
They frequently do not hear from public like city councilors might. The planning commission, I mean.
Thank you.
So, Terry has his hand up, and then Kay has her hand up, and I see Fran with her finger up. So if we can do it in that order, Terry.
Sorry, I finished. I don't think I had my hand up. At least,
No, Terry Trimwell is also here, Terrain. So different Terry.
I'd like to say that it is possible to live within the city boundaries with no gas line and no electric bill. We do it. We've done it for 5 years now. Up here on Mount Sequoia, we're connected to SWEPCO, but because of the net metering law, we end up with no gas, no electric bill either. And we have 2 electric vehicles that get powered under what we generate on our roof. So this is possible, and we're doing it. Number 2 is New York City actually is the city with the least per capita CO2 emissions. It's not Portland, not Bellevue, it's New York City because of density issues. Another point, green roofs are good in terms of direct temperature, but white roofs are better in terms of overall climate and energy efficiency. It's reflective. And that gets into another point. We can have mitigation, adaptation, which is good locally, but doesn't do anything for climate change overall, doesn't do anything for climate justice, and misery. Those are our choices. Mitigation, adaptation, or misery. That's it. And
Thank
the
you,
other
Terry.
thing is, both the Omni Center and Good Shepherd Lutheran Church have solar on top. And it's most of the bills are covered through net metering.
Mhm.
I
It's
think
very
you're doing
true.
a great job, Terry, with all the work that you've done with your house. And there's been some studies that said if we've never gone to the war in Iraq or Afghanistan, that all the money we spent on war, if we could have put a solar panel or several panels on everybody's house in this country, and just imagine what the difference that would have made.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd invite you to come to our house. Maybe after Omicron dies down, please come. Take a look. It's a real house, and
And very pretty.
thank you. But we have, the electric bill is essentially zero. It's possible.
Thank you, Terry. Kay, did you want to make your statement?
Yeah, I had a couple questions for Teresa. One is, okay, let me read my notes here because we kind of skipped along. Pavers. I wanted to ask about the pervious pavers. Who makes those? Where do we get those from?
I'm sorry, I don't
you
know
know.
the answer to that. I've asked the city why we're not doing low impact development, LID, more. And I've been told that the city employees don't have much experience with it. And I'm like, well, get the experience. We need to really encourage this. So I'm sorry, I don't know where. There's that small little demonstration project out there at Mount Kessler. And there's a kind of a sign that you can read about it, but I don't have any more information.
Okay, because I'm not sure. I mean, it makes sense that when something is made locally or it's available locally, and I don't know what we do or we don't do, to be honest with you. But that saves costs right there. If you can use local materials, a local business, it just makes sense. So that was one thing. I just wondered if we knew, because that's a very good idea, because you don't want to end up with all that cement everywhere. That's when you start having your drainage issues. That's when you start having the heat, then you
Exactly.
reduce your, so I get that, especially if you lived in big cities, it's nasty. Also, solar storage. Now, I don't know much about this, but I've been a big fan of solar for a long time. What do we do in the city? Because one of the biggest problems I heard, or at least I've read about, is that we don't have the way to really store a lot of that energy that's created. Is that improved now? Do we have better ways to do that? Because that would be great for homes, businesses. Of course, the electric companies might not be happy. Utility companies might not be happy because, they're not making money. And that's what it comes down to, who's making a profit. Unfortunately, we don't always think about each other and not just making a short-term profit.
Well, there's grid tied systems, which is I believe what Terry has, although he can speak for himself. Okay, he's got his thumb up. So he's on the grid. So he's generating electricity from his house, and there's a meter, but it's being cycled back into the SWEPCO grid so that everybody benefits from that. But he's getting credit for that from net metering. Or there's off-grid systems. Like I have a little cabin out in Newton County where I have an off-grid solar system, and I've got batteries there. So the price of the panels and the batteries has come down significantly. So I put in an 80-watt system back in 2013, which is a very small, tiny little one single solar panel for about $1,000. Well, one of my my alternators actually blew, and so I designed the whole new system out there. My inverter, and so that system really cost about the same amount, about $1,000, and I got brand new batteries. I have a 400-watt system, and it's much larger, and that's just to demonstrate how much the price has dropped in the last 7 years.
Okay, well, that's what I had. Thank you, guys. Very interesting.
Thank you. Fran.
Aha. I wanted to comment on Terrain's dissertation on what New York is doing, and Maya's comment about is the city dealing with resiliency in organizational work or in the staff. I think that if we could start, I mean, what Terrain was talking about in New York and what she's talking about in, do we have anything in the city? Teresa, great talk, by the way, Teresa. What do we have in the way of a chance of getting the council to, before it makes a decision about anything, to incorporate the precautionary principle in their decision-making so that they have a hierarchy of how to make decisions, and taking with what people now know, now that climate after 50 years has finally made it to the public arena, start with climate. Before development can go in, what you were saying with your resolution was exactly what I've been harping on for decades, and that is, what's it going to do to the overall city? How much heat is it going to add to take down those trees? How much carbon dioxide is it going to add to increase that pavement and those traffic lanes? If you start with climate first and have to justify actions on that score, it would change the dynamic of how we live and grow and decision make in this town. I also wanted to comment about what we can do. We citizens leave a lot of money on the table. You have free access with letters to the editor. Anytime you read an article and you want to have a link to it, write a 3-sentence letter to the editor. He might print it. If you read an article in the paper and want to start a local dialogue, it will keep that topic in the news if you'll just write a few lines to the paper. We don't have very many people reading the newspaper anymore. So you could possibly do this with social media as well. We need a forum where we are questioning and we're commenting constantly. If we can keep something in the news, it finally soaks through the politicians' brains and makes them worry a little bit about their own decisions. And on pavers, I priced those once upon a time, and there's different brick companies. There's some up in Springdale have pavers. I ran into a difficulty with them because there's so much foundation work that has to be done with dirt work and gravel and all kinds of foundational work before you can do it. But there are some wonderful paver areas around in the Northwest Arkansas. So, and they're changing all the time. It's been about 5 or 6 years since I did any research on that. So I'm not sure what's available right now. And I wanted to mention on plastic, bless your heart, Teresa. You ran up against the enabling legislation part of the state's legislature. And yeah, I think we should throw it back in their face about local control of our decisions of how we want to run the town, but they're in control right now. So we have to make it financially interesting and therefore politically interesting. I was just reading an article in The Guardian yesterday, and of course, the old brain can't remember today exactly what the amount of nanoparticles or microparticles of plastic that we humans are consuming every year. It's 50,000, and that's before air and water particles are added in. But this article in The Guardian, I think, said we're coming into contact and maybe ingesting a credit card of plastic a week.
It's huge.
Yummy.
I think it said a week.
Yeah.
And that kind of knocked me off my socks. And might be why I can't remember if it was per week, per month, per year. I think it was per week.
Even a credit card a year is a lot.
Yeah, that much plastic floating around in the old body, that might explain some things about my health.
So,
but,
Fran, to answer.
That's essentially, I took a few notes, and those are some things I really wanted to point out. But the resiliency and the starting point with climate.
So I think the Buffalo River is a great example of a win story here in Arkansas. And it took a lot of people and a lot of letters and a lot of showing up at the Arkansas Pollution Control and Ecology Commission, and just a huge amount of phone calls. And then the river showing just the damage that had been done. The river spoke to the legislature and to the governor. But it's that kind of relentless pressure and mindset that has to happen here in Fayetteville, because the developers are doing that to us. We get calls all the time. So you have to counterbalance that. And we have I would say, a very pro-development planning staff at the city. So again, institutionally, you have to counter that. One thing that I didn't mention, because again, I could have gone on for hours, is that we really want to change the climate. We want to have a climate score. So right now, when anything comes before us at the city council, they talk about an infill score. Well, the planning group, the development group within the city created this infill score, and it has things like, do you have water service? Do you have sewer service? How close to schools are you? Do you have a sidewalk? Are you close to the trail? So you get a point for each of those. But we need to counterbalance that with saying, hey, are you within a floodplain? Maybe you get a minus score. Do you have more than 30% tree canopy or more than 50% tree canopy? You get a negative score. All of these kind of things to balance out this so-called infill score. And so I've been having discussions, and I'm going to write another email tomorrow because of all of this, to say, when are we going to talk about this infill score and adjust it, or create a separate climate score? We've got to do that. And what they've been telling me is we're waiting to get a new planner on board. Well, she came on board a couple of weeks ago, so it's time to get moving on this, where we have a more balanced representation of how good a property is for a rezoning or redevelopment.
Amen.
Yeah, wow. Shelley's had her hand up for a little while.
Yeah, Teresa, you mentioned that you had put forward a resolution for buying ecologically valuable land, and it was turned down 2-4. And I wondered what the opposition was based on. That doesn't seem like a huge lot of money for buying ecologically valuable land.
It's a tiny amount. Somebody said, why did you make it so low? And I said, because I wanted to get just a foothold. So at least we'd start the discussion and start funding that. I had people, Sloan Scroggin, I'll name him because I think he's kind of proud of what he said. He said, you're just going to buy land that people would normally build a house on. That was his rationale why he didn't want it, even though I pointed out you know, this is for areas that that sometimes are unsuitable for building houses on, that nobody would ever want to build a house on. Mark Kenyon, he said, well, we're in a budget deficit. Well, that's absolutely untrue. We had a $3 million surplus from 2021 budget. So they, again, the developers are very much advocates and also start large campaigns to put forward their position where they just want to build, and any kind of denial of a rezoning or reduced rezoning will hurt business in Fayetteville, because their mantra is that it's so difficult to build in Fayetteville. That's why we go to Springdale, Rogers, or Bentonville. You make it so long and so hard for us to build here that we want to go somewhere else. Well, my counter to that is, how come we're now the second largest city in Arkansas? Apparently people really like it up here and are still able to build and develop.
If I might say one more thing, it seems like it would be connected to follow what you said and what Fran picked up on about having some kind of baseline, some kind of study about our policies, how climate change impacts our policies, and how policies should have, just have the stats on what is happening with climate change, and also preserving a certain amount of land. It seemed like that would be connected.
You would think. And then also, you know, some of the latest estimates are that we are really going to need to preserve about 40 to 50% of our land mass globally. And we're on track to, you know, 95% of the old growth forests are gone. 95%. There's only 5% left, little remnants here and there. So we've got a long way to go.
And places like Arkansas, where there are still a lot of open areas, this is the place that it would be easiest to do that, rather than in New York City or the excessively developed areas.
Exactly, Gladys. And how we can figure out how to monetize that, how we can figure out to make it worth their while to keep those forests.
I see a note, ditto to what John said. Did Karen get off already? What did you say? John, can you hear me? Maybe you can't hear.
You're talking about what I put in the chat?
Apparently, because Karen just dittoed it, whatever it was.
I just said, thank you, Teresa, for your important work and your willingness to communicate and educate and move us further in the direction of environmental sanity. We need you and lots more like you.
That's very true. Very true. Thank you, John. Which brings up something to me that I wanted to put in. The thing that I am really noticing is the value. Several people have referenced the value of united voices of environmental groups. And I'm feeling like there is some of that in Arkansas. I'm feeling like I don't know that that's necessarily true in Fayetteville. And that I don't actually, you know, before COVID, we saw each other, we felt like there were other groups operating. Since COVID, none of us have been meeting. None of us had, to my knowledge, have been communicating. And it feels like there needs to be some kind of a better convening of some of the groups who have interest in environmental issues, and that is something we need to be thinking about, because just because we did not keep meeting does not mean the rest of the world was not doing things that we needed to be aware of. And I think we need to be tuned to that a little bit better.
Well, 2 points. The Buffalo groups are still meeting, because I'll just say that. So they're still going on and meeting and still trying to get a permanent moratorium for no hog factories in the Buffalo River watershed. So that's still happening. The other thing that I meant to mention in my talk was, you know, there's a city council Ward 2 election going on. You know, the election will be finalized, I think, this Tuesday. I mean, y'all should ask all three candidates, Do you support preserving green space? Would you support $100,000 annually for the city to set aside in a CIP? Would you support a climate score or revision to the infill score? So there's a lot of these things that you all can do right now, you Ward 2 residents, whoever's on the call, to really say, hey, if you want my vote, you know, you really need to be, this is my interest. We need to be planning for climate resiliency. And that's the way I want you to vote. And I'm going to be watching.
Well, I'm just curious, are there any Ward 2 people on this call?
What?
Okay. People from Ward 2 on this call.
Oh,
Okay, Kelly and Donna are from Ward 2. Okay, Kelly and Donna, you can do that.
Yeah, we are, and we've had a hard time deciphering just from the paraphernalia supplied by the candidates as to
yeah, I hear
who to
you.
vote for, and still on the fence. And that would be an excellent thing to find out.
Mhm. But it would be easy to just shoot them an email or give them a call and say, what's your plan for climate resiliency? And
Yeah,
let them to tell you.
yeah, yeah, that's true.
And
I see Maya and then I see Fran. Maya, go ahead.
I was, well, I'm glad Teresa said what she did because I was hesitant to raise this issue. But I was thinking there is a selection Tuesday for a city council person. 3 of the people who are running, Leslie and her husband, are developers. Mike Whitaker, I think his name is, has been on the planning commission. The other person is a woman who's kind of unknown. I don't know much about her, but I'm hopeful that she might be more open to some more progressive ideas just because she's not locked into either being a developer or years on the planning commission. So I don't know how many people here will be voting on that thing Tuesday, but if you can spread the word any of what your opinions are about these people, it would be good. I don't know how many people know that Leslie Belden and Ted, her husband, are developers.
Let me just say that Mike Whitaker's only been on the planning commission about 6 months. So
Oh, really?
he hasn't been on there very long at all.
Oh, that's good news.
And then Kristen Scott, I believe she was ahead of Fayetteville Housing Authority for a while. So
Right.
so I'm just letting you know, they both of them have been involved in city government or associated city government.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Fran?
well, I was just going to say that I tried to quiz the 3 of them via an article a couple of weeks ago, asking them about infill. And the 2 that are on the planning commission did vote for the additional housing on in a zone, the 4 homes per acre, RSF4. And I didn't directly contact them. They might not take the paper. That's beside the point, I guess. But the questions that I think that we really need some answers to for this particular ward, which affects the entire city. You know, every vote will be citywide, even though they just represent a ward, needs to boil down to development. And the planning commission pretty traditionally is a developers. They plan for development. They don't plan for greenery and green spaces. So, you know, take them to task on that if you're going to call them, or it's short notice. It's Tuesday, the vote is Tuesday. So anyway, I know nothing about Kristen Scott other than I think she was in the school system. I think she's been a principal or something. I may be imagining that. Leslie has been on the planning commission for quite a long time and seems to pretty well think infill is just wonderful. And I don't know about Mike. I really don't, but hopefully he's got a good resume. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Okay, and I see Kay. You're still muted, Kay.
Yeah, trying to get my hand to work. Just quits after a while. I tried to figure out what ward I was in, and the links, there were 2 links on the, and I've not been back since, to find out what ward you were in, and they did not work. So I know
Where do
that
you-
everybody's busy with a lot of things. So I thought I was in Ward 2, but apparently not, because I've never been given an absentee ballot to vote.
Where do
And
you live, Kay?
Joyce and Steel Boulevard.
You're in Ward 3.
Okay, I
believe.
figured
I
that's probably
think.
what it was. I knew it wasn't Ward 4. It wasn't Ward 1. I thought it's got to be 3, right? But I had no way to know, just to
I
let you
think-
know that.
I think you're in 3. I can check real quick here. Just because there is a link online if you go to the city's GIS map. So I can let you know real quick.
Yeah, see if it works for you, because when I tried it, it didn't give me, I put my address in, it didn't give me. But that's been a couple of months ago, unless they fixed it.
So we're getting close to time. We still got about 10 minutes maybe, but I want to point out what we're going to be talking about next month, so people know to come back next month. It's lovely to have everybody here. I'm really pleased that we could actually get this kind of information out, and that we'll have this to share with other people now. But next month we are going to have a very special speaker, a climate activist, a pipeline activist, who's also a Quaker, whose name is slipping my mind.
Eileen.
Shelley? Eileen Flanagan. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. She's going to be speaking to us. She's from Pennsylvania, and she's going to be talking about a couple of things. One, she's going to be talking about Line 3, which is the pipeline that she has just been working very hard on getting it stopped with the indigenous tribes who are working against it, especially in Minnesota and Wisconsin areas. She's also going to be talking about a campaign that she's doing through the Quaker Equate, it's Earth Quaker Action Team that she's the head of. And that team is going to be doing a campaign to pressure Vanguard, which some of you may have money invested through Vanguard, but they are now the investment firm that has the most investment in fossil fuels at this point. And so they're going to be pressuring them to do a particular action where they will be putting the options that they already have into the easiest possible ways to find the good investment options. So people can easily invest their money into green projects rather than automatically seeing all the fossil fuel industry that they can make money off of. They can also see green investments at the top of the list rather than having to hunt for them the way they do right now. So she's going to be talking about this campaign and about the issues that she's working on. And so I hope everybody will come back and listen to her speak. And so now, do we have other questions or comments? And Teresa, did you find anything for Kay?
So Kay, if you're on the southwest corner of Steele and Joyce, then you're in Ward 2. But if you're on the north or the northeast or the southeast, you're in Ward 3.
That's weird. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe that's why I had a problem finding it. But
maybe.
I'm at Uptown Apartments. That's where I live.
Oh,
So it's right there on the corner. I'm not sure north, south, east, or west. I don't have a sense of direction. I haven't driven in a long time.
Yeah, you're in Ward 2 then. If you're at Uptown Apartments, you're in Ward 2. So
okay,
you should call them tomorrow.
Yeah, because I would like to vote, and I did pull up some information about God, what's her name here? Sorry, Kristen Scott, and she is an educator. She's been a teacher. She's a assistant professor at U of A in Fort Smith. She served for three terms on the Housing Authority Committee. So she's familiar with them. So just to let you know, she was probably the person I was going to vote for. So just to let you know, that's what I found.
Okay,
But
thank
I'll-
you.
Thank you all.
Call them. That's what I say. Get out there and get on the phone with them and put them
First
on the
thing
spot.
tomorrow, man, I'll be on it, girl. I vote.
All right.
I vote.
Any other closing comments before we wrap up here?
Thank you, Teresa.
Thanks,
That was really, really informative.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
all. It's so nice to see everybody. You know, since we've been in our houses, we haven't been able to get out and meet with each other. So
So
great to
true.
see everybody.
Well done.
Okay, let's see. It's actually, we've got a couple more minutes. Teresa, do you have anything that you would like to just wrap up, bring to a close, anything that you need to say?
Well, I would say I'm so glad you all sat through my conversation, my talk, and I will be tapping on you for when I bring this back up to see if we can't get the green fund started. So I'll be reaching out and saying, hey, please contact, your council member or your friend, and let's keep changing the conversation. And you've also inspired me to do some more things. So every now and then I need a good kick in the pants to keep rolling. So thank
We
you.
all do.
Okay, we're so proud.
Yeah, Gladys,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Teresa, do you have either a blog or a newsletter or anything that we could sign up for?
I really don't. I've been just kind of maxed out on a lot of different things, and I don't have a blog or a newsletter, but maybe if I could focus a little bit more, I would try and do that. So
Okay.
yeah, sorry.
Well, just know that we're supporting you.
Thank you.
Question, Teresa, real quick. Do you mind staying on the call for a second when everybody leaves? I just had a question for you.
Okay.
Is that possible?
It has to be a short question. Okay, it has to be a short
Oh,
question.
okay,
because
okay.
I have to go to another meeting.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you could give her a call.
Yeah, just give me a phone call. That's okay.
I don't have your number. I don't know if you want to give it out over
So,
public.
yeah, I don't care. It's on the city website, so why wouldn't I say it here, right?
Okay, yeah, now you make a point there. Okay, all right.
All right, it's 206-713-2265.
Okay. Give you a call after this, do you mind?
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, everybody. It's been a great meeting.
Thanks for hosting, Gladys. Appreciate
yeah.
the opportunity.
Thank you so much for being here, Teresa. And everybody come back next month.
I'll be here. I'll be coming back and listen to your new speaker.
All right. Excellent.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.